sahabat Katadata, dalam wawancara khusus kali ini kami akan berbincang-bincang dengan seorang diplomat, ahli, dan pengamat geopolitik yang namanya sudah masyhur di kalangan internasional. Ia adalah Profesor Kishore Mahbubani. Beliau pernah menjadi seorang duta besar Singapura untuk Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa, kemudian menjadi Presiden Dewan Keamanan PBB, dan juga pengajar di Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. Kini, ia menjabat sebagai Distinguished Fellow Asia Researcher di National University of Singapore. Hello, Professor Kishore. Thank you so much for your time. We would ask you several questions about how do you view the global situation and also especially in ASEAN. Maybe I will start this interview with this one question. We know that there's a lot of, trouble in this global situation, like maybe in war in Russia and Ukraine, and also US and also China. How do you view this situation, and how can Asia help to find a solution in this, and what's the best acceptable solution for this problem, Professor?
Well, you're right that the world is a troubled place. There's a war in Ukraine. There's an ongoing geopolitical contest between United States and China, and it's definitely going to affect the ASEAN countries. And I think when you ask what can we do about it, I think the first thing we need to do is to be very, very careful.
Okay.
So firstly, I think the Ukraine war is not a war that concerns ASEAN countries or Asian countries. Of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is illegal, and I think we have all condemned it. But we're not going to get involved in the war, and we should actually push all the sides involved, Russia, Europe, to work for peace rather than to have the war continue. The US-China contest is much closer to home to ASEAN, and ASEAN was definitely going to be affected by this US-China contest, as I document in my book as China Won. So I think it's very important for the ASEAN countries to proactively tell both United States and China that ASEAN doesn't want to take sides in this contest. That ASEAN wants to be good friends with the United States, and ASEAN wants to be good friends with China. I think that's the consistent message, and I think we must tell them now, before the contest accelerates, because otherwise they'll try to push us to take sides, and if they push us to take sides, that would be very bad for ASEAN.
Okay, I see, Professor. And also in your recent book, The ASEAN 21st Century, you also mentioned that the West is failing to see ASEAN like the Southeast Asia, also East Asia and South Asia. How did this happen? What are the mistakes that the West failed to see this, and what can be a lesson for us Asian in this?
Well, I think I'm glad you mentioned my book, The Asian 21st Century, because the publisher expected only 20,000 downloads of the book. Instead, there have been 3.24 million.
Okay, that's a lot number.
3.24 million instead of 20,000. So there's been an explosion of global interest in that book. And the reason I mentioned that is that the world is psychologically preparing itself for the Asian century, and the West isn't.
Okay.
And I think the West has failed to realize that the era of Western domination of world history is over.
Yeah.
And now the Asian countries want to make their own choices. And fortunately, we in Asia, in some ways, are showing the world how to do a better job of maintaining peace and prosperity in our region. So I maintain that ASEAN today is the most successful regional organization in the world because it has done a better job of taking care of peace and prosperity in our region. We're not perfect. We have problems. We have problems in Myanmar and so on and so forth. But despite the problems, we are progressing. And we have no major war in our neighborhood, unlike the European Union, which has got to deal with the Ukraine war. So I think it's important for the rest of the world to try and understand why ASEAN is so successful and what lessons can the world learn from ASEAN. And that's why I also wrote the book called The ASEAN Miracle, which has been translated and published into Bahasa Indonesia also.
Okay, I will look up to that book. Okay,
Yeah.
because I read that in English.
Ah.
Okay, but also you mentioned that regarding the successful societies in Asia, there's also three big countries that have a big impact: the CIA, or China, India, and also ASEAN. They will have 3 billion middle class, and that's one of the biggest number in history. While if we compare it to Japan, they used to have 8 times bigger economy than ASEAN in 2000, but now it shrinks to 1.5 times. But even ASEAN is expected to have a bigger number in 2030. What do you think is the key success of ASEAN in terms of its economy, Professor?
Well, I think the incredible success of ASEAN, I mean, as you mentioned, in the year 2000,
Yeah.
Japan was the second largest economy in the world. And so Japan's economy was 8 times the size of ASEAN. Now Japan's economy is only
shrinking.
1.5 times, and ASEAN is going to become bigger than Japan.
Yes.
So clearly, Japan is a sunset power, and ASEAN is a sunrise organization. And I think there are many reasons why ASEAN succeeded. In my book, The ASEAN Miracle, I say it's due to three four-letter words. The first is four-letter word beginning with F, which is fear. F-E-A-R.
Yeah.
ASEAN countries were afraid during the Cold War. So they came together and created a sense of solidarity that provided the foundations for ASEAN to come together. Then there's luck. We were lucky that in our early years, both the United States and China supported ASEAN a great deal. And to have the support of great powers like United States and China helped us a lot. But the third four-letter word is golf, G-O-L-F.
As in the sport?
In the sport, yes.
Okay.
So I think when the ASEAN ministers and diplomats played golf with each other, as I did, I was an ASEAN official, we developed a sense of camaraderie with each other,
Okay.
which I think proved to be very, very helpful. So I think the people should study ASEAN more, because ASEAN provides a ray of hope for a world which is becoming increasingly divided and polarized. Since Southeast Asia is the most diverse region of planet Earth, the fact that we can bring everyone together in a strong regional organization shows that ASEAN can teach the world lessons on how to create a successful regional organization.
Okay. So there are three key factors. Yeah?
Fear, luck, and golf.
Fear, luck, and golf. Okay. We are gonna move to ASEAN. So you mentioned that Regional Comprehensive Economic Partner, or RCEP, it shapes the ASEAN economy along with its growth and development. But also Indonesia's culture of musyawarah mufakat is already in ASEAN DNA, and it's proven to be a major asset. Are those enough, Professor, to keep the place ASEAN in its geopolitical issues?
Well, I think ASEAN has got to be very careful,
Okay.
because there's a danger that the US-China geopolitical contest could divide the 10 ASEAN countries. And so it's very important that the 10 ASEAN countries remain united in the face of the new geopolitical competition. But you're also right that the Indonesian gene of musyawarah and mufakat has been injected into the ASEAN gene, and that's been very good for us. And so we've learned to compromise. And many regional organizations break down because they cannot compromise. So like India and Pakistan cannot even have normal trade with each other, which is very sad. They should have normal trade with each other. Whereas by contrast, in ASEAN, we have opened up, and the total trade in ASEAN has gone up dramatically as a result of ASEAN economies being more open. So I think what ASEAN has done clearly is going to teach lessons to the rest of the world.
Okay. And that musyawarah mufakat is enough?
Yeah.
It's enough.
No, musyawarah mufakat is a good base.
Okay.
But also, like as you mentioned, membership of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership
Okay.
is also very important, because it's the 10 ASEAN countries together with China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, you know. And those countries have in some ways dynamic economies, and by integrating with them, ASEAN can grow.
Okay. I see. Okay, now we can also maybe move to Indonesia. You have wrote an article titled "The Genius of Jokowi in 2021," and after almost 10 years of Jokowi's rule, do you still see him as a genius, Professor?
Well, I think it's President Jokowi has been an exceptionally good leader.
Okay.
By any standards, because he's given Indonesia 10 years of peace and prosperity. By the way, like his predecessor, President SBY, who also gave Indonesia 10 years of peace and prosperity. So I think that is Indonesia is fortunate to have had political stability for so long, and that's an asset for Indonesia. And when I wrote the article about the genius of Jokowi, people misunderstood the meaning of the title. The genius of Jokowi means the special qualities of President Jokowi, the special strengths of Jokowi. And he is somebody who has some unusual, special strengths. And one of them is that he's able to unify the country and create a unified set of government leaders from different political parties and get them to work together.
Okay.
And that is something in many countries it doesn't happen. So United States, for example, is the most advanced democracy in the world in some ways. But it was impossible for President Donald Trump to get any Democrat to come to work for him. And even President Joe Biden hasn't got a Republican to work for him. Whereas by contrast, President Jokowi has been a uniting figure and has got representatives from so many political parties to join his government.
Okay, so one of the biggest project that Jokowi has now is to relocate the capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan. What do you think of this project, Professor?
Well, I think it's a very brave project because it's not easy to move your capital. I'm not surprised that there's a lot of resistance to the idea because people don't want to move, you know. But over time, I think it's very clear that the capacity for Jakarta to accommodate more people is limited, and the city, as you know, is sinking as a result of climate change. So in some ways, it shows that President Jokowi is looking ahead and thinking about Indonesia's situation 20, 30 years down the road. And he's being responsible in terms of anticipating what the future problems might be.
Okay. Talking about climate change, that one problem is also a new problem, especially after the pandemic, and also digital disruption. And lots of countries have made ambitious plans to tackle it. And how do you view those issues, and what should Asia do to deal with those problems?
Well, I think on climate change, it's one thing that ASEAN countries should do is to speak out and tell both United States and China that since climate change is such a pressing issue and one that could damage all of us and all of planet Earth, United States and China should press the pause button on their bilateral geopolitical contest and focus on taking care of the global challenges, common global challenges like climate change, or even like COVID, or global financial crisis. So we in ASEAN, therefore, should not remain quiet when the US-China contest accelerates. We should tell them, no, there's something more important to deal with, and that is climate change. And we should be more outspoken in saying this.
Okay. Also, less than 5 months, we will have an election, and also we will choose a new president, Professor. And now, if you see, there are like 3 potential candidates but they come from 2 different blocks, one from the president man and also one from the opposition, way far from the government. And how do you see the current political situation in Indonesia and the next year, maybe after Jokowi? How do you see that?
Well, I think, having elections, regular elections, which are accepted by the people, is a very positive development.
Okay.
It's a way of demonstrating that the leader of the country enjoys the support of his people, right?
Right.
And so it's good that Indonesia is having regular elections, and as long as the elections are fair and the election organizers are neutral, then I think whoever wins has the legitimacy. And as you know, in Singapore, we recently had a presidential election which was quite remarkable because nobody expected President Taman Shanmugaratnam to win by 70% of the vote. But I'm glad he did. It showed that, that he enjoys a lot of support. Yeah. And what is significant in the case of Singapore is that Singapore is 75% Chinese. Okay. But in a country which is 75% Chinese, they elected a non-Chinese with 70% of the vote, which is remarkable.
Yes.
But that is what elections can do, showing what the people want. And I have no doubt that the people of Indonesia will choose wisely their next president.
Okay, maybe my last question is this. Who do you think is the most potential candidate out of all three? May it be Ganjar Pranowo, may it be Prabowo Subianto, or maybe Anies Baswedan? What do you think of them?
Well, one of the rules of international relations is that foreigners should not comment on domestic politics. And since I'm a citizen of Singapore, I should not take any partisan positions in the Indonesian domestic politics.
Okay.
So it would be wrong for me to interfere by passing an opinion.
But you still think that whoever wins, they will be a legitimate...
Of course, yes. If the elections are fair, and I'm confident the elections will be fair, then I think the leader will enjoy a lot of legitimacy.
Whoever it is. Okay. Well, that was our last question, Professor. Again, thank you so much for your time, for your information. You have given us a lot of interesting insights, and I hope we can meet in another occasion, and I hope we can talk again in some time.
Sure.
Thank you so much,
I'll be happy
Professor.
to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.